First contact in the emergency room. Dr. Sarah Chen's night shift at Chicago Memorial was already unusual before the shimmer of a teleportation field lit up the emergency room. After 15 years in emergency medicine, she thought she'd seen everything. But when the light faded to reveal a towering figure cradling a small bundle, she realized everything was about to change. The beam stood nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. 4 arms clutched a wrapped bundle to its chest, while a third pair frantically gestured at the stunned hospital staff. "Please," it spoke in halting English, voice modulated through what must have been a translation device. "My child is dying." Sarah was moving before conscious thought kicked in. "Trauma Bay 1," she called out, already reaching for the bundle. The alien hesitated only a moment before surrendering its precious cargo. Through the wrappings, Sarah could see a smaller version of the parent, a child, perhaps 4 or 5 by human standards, whose scales had dulled to an alarming gray. "I'm Dr. Chen," she said, laying the child on the examination bed. "Can you tell me what happened?" "I am kYeah," the alien parent responded, all 6 hands now twisting together in obvious distress. "The authorities on our world, they say nothing can be done. But I heard rumors, stories of human medical innovation, of your species' ability to solve problems others consider impossible." Sarah's hands moved efficiently over the child's form, noting the rapid, shallow breathing and elevated temperature. Her vitals monitor beeped in protest, unable to make sense of the alien physiology. "How long has your child been sick?" "3 cycles, what you would call months," kYeah replied. "It began with fatigue, then the color fade. Now Kirin barely wakes." A sound somewhere between a chirp and a sob escaped the translator. "Our healers say it is genetic cascade failure. Terminal. But I refuse to accept that." Genetic cascade failure. Sarah had read theoretical papers about similar conditions in Earth species, where one genetic mutation triggered a chain reaction of cellular breakdown. But this was unlike anything in human medical literature. "Dr. Chen." One of her nurses burst into the trauma bay, tablet in hand. "Security is on their way. Protocol for unauthorized alien presence." "Belay that," Sarah snapped, not taking her eyes off her patient. "This is a medical emergency. Call Dr. Patel in genetics and Dr. Winston in xenobiology. Wake them up if you have to. And get me every scanner we've got." "But doctor, the Interstellar Medical Treaty clearly states." "I don't care what the treaty states," Sarah interrupted. "I have a sick child in my ER. Everything else is secondary." She turned to kYeah, whose multifaceted eyes were tracking every movement. "I need to know everything about your species' biology. Normal baselines, genetic structure, previous treatments attempted. Everything." kYeah's translator crackled. "Using human medical technology on my child violates at least 15 interstellar laws. You could lose your license. Your government could face sanctions." Sarah met those alien eyes steadily. "Do you care about any of that?" "No," kYeah whispered. "I will tell you everything." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Security came and went, their protests falling on deaf ears. Sarah's team worked with quiet efficiency, adapting human medical equipment to alien biology. kYeah never left Kirin's side, providing crucial information about their species' biochemistry, while gently stroking their child's dulled scales. Dawn was breaking when Dr. Patel finally looked up from his analysis of Kirin's genetic scan. "It's like nothing we've ever seen," he said, excitement barely contained. "The cascade failure is triggered by a protein complex that's unique to their species. But the mechanism, it's similar to several human genetic disorders. We might be able to adapt existing treatments." Might. kYeah's translator couldn't quite capture the mix of hope and fear in that single word. "What my colleague means," Sarah said, laying a gentle hand on one of kYeah's arms, "is that we need to try something unprecedented. A combination of human gene therapy and treatments adapted to your biology. It's experimental. Dangerous. But it is hope, kYeah finished. More than we had yesterday. The alien drew up to its full height, all 6 arms spread in what Sarah somehow knew was a gesture of supplication. I place my child's life in your hands, Dr. Chen. Whatever the consequences, whatever the cost, save kYeah. Sarah looked at the small form on the bed, at the parent willing to risk everything for their child, at her team watching expectantly. In that moment, she knew this would change everything. Medicine, interstellar relations, her own life. And she knew none of that mattered compared to saving one small life. Let's begin, she said, and with those words, the future shifted on its axis. Breaking protocol. The genetics lab at Chicago Memorial had never seen such activity at 3 in the morning. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a holographic display of kYeah's DNA structure, its alien patterns rotating slowly in the air before her. Behind the complex strings of genetic code, she could see kYeah maintaining a silent vigil beside the stasis pod where kYeah rested. The protein degradation is accelerating, Dr. Patel said, manipulating the display to highlight a particular sequence. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes. They'd been at this for 18 hours straight, and the hospital administration was growing increasingly nervous about their unauthorized alien patients. Show me the comparison with human genetic disorders again. The hologram shifted, human DNA strands appearing alongside the alien sequences. Despite the fundamental differences, certain patterns were unmistakable. There, Sarah pointed. That's where the cascade begins. It's similar to Hutchinson-Gilford progeria in humans, but the rate of cellular breakdown is exponentially faster. A commotion outside the lab drew their attention. Through the glass walls, they could see hospital security escorting a group of officials in formal attire. Their bearing screamed government. Dr. Chen, hospital administrator David Morris, burst into the lab, his normally impeccable suit wrinkled from what had clearly been a hastily arranged early morning meeting. We have representatives from the State Department and the Interstellar Medical Council demanding to speak with you immediately. Sarah straightened her spine, already knowing this confrontation was inevitable. Tell them I'm in the middle of critical research. Tell them yourself, Morris replied as the officials filed in behind him. A human woman in a crisp business suit stepped forward, flanked by 2 aliens of a species Sarah didn't recognize. Tall, crystalline beings whose bodies seemed to refract light. Dr. Chen, I'm Amanda Hayes from the State Department. These are Representatives Catal and Zinn from the IMC. You are in violation of multiple sections of the Interstellar Medical Treaty. This facility is not certified for xenological treatment, and the patient in question entered Earth illegally. My child is dying. kYeah spoke from beside the stasis pod, all 6 hands clenched in distress. Our own healers gave up. Would you have me do nothing? One of the crystalline aliens, Catal, Sarah assumed, turned toward kYeah. You have broken our laws. Exposing humans to unknown biological factors puts both species at risk. The treaties exist for a reason. With all due respect, Sarah interjected, stepping between the officials and her patients. Those treaties never anticipated this situation. We're on the verge of a breakthrough that could save not just kYeah, but countless others with similar conditions. You can't know that, Hayes argued. The risks. I can show you exactly what we know, Sarah interrupted, gesturing to the holographic display. The genetic mechanisms we're studying have parallels in human medicine. This isn't just about saving one child. This is an opportunity for genuine medical advancement that could benefit both our species. Dr. Patel stepped forward, his excitement overtaking his usual reserve. Look at this sequence. He manipulated the display, highlighting specific patterns. The way the protein cascade works, it's giving us insights into human genetic disorders we've never had before. We've already identified 3 possible new treatment approaches for progeria just from studying these patterns. The crystalline aliens exchanged looks that somehow managed to be meaningful despite their alien features. Zinn spoke, voice chiming like wind through glass. You believe human medicine can succeed where our healers failed. I believe together we might succeed where either of us alone would fail, Sarah answered carefully. But every moment we spend arguing is a moment we're not working on saving Kieran. Hayes consulted her tablet, frowning. Even if we wanted to authorize this research, the proper channels would take weeks to. My child doesn't have weeks. Vilara's translator crackled with emotion. I will accept any punishment, pay any price. But please, let them try. Sarah watched the officials closely, seeing the moment when certainty wavered. She pressed her advantage. Give us 48 hours. Let us prove this can work. If we fail, she took a deep breath. I'll accept full responsibility, and whatever consequences come with it. The crystalline aliens conferred in musical tones too high for the human ear to properly process. Finally, Kittul turned to Hayes. The Council will grant a temporary research dispensation. 48 hours. But we will monitor everything. Hayes didn't look happy, but she nodded. I'll need hourly reports, and... A sudden alarm from the stasis pod cut through the bureaucratic discussion. Sarah was moving before anyone else could react, her medical training taking over. Kieran's readings were spiking dangerously. The cascade is accelerating, she announced, hands flying over the controls. We need to start treatment now. Vilara pressed against the pod, all four eyes wide with fear. Save them, please. Sarah met those alien eyes, seeing in them the same desperate hope she'd seen in countless human parents. In that moment, species didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the universal drive to protect a child. Everyone who isn't medical staff, clear the room, she ordered, already reaching for the experimental treatment they'd synthesized. We're doing this now. As the officials reluctantly withdrew, Sarah caught Hayes's eye. Your 48 hours starts now, Doctor, the diplomat said quietly. Make them count. Sarah turned back to her patient, to the scared parent, to her dedicated team. Let's make history, she said, and plunged the needle into the stasis field. The price of hope. The first 12 hours after administering the experimental treatment were the longest of Sarah's life. She watched as Kieran's vital signs fluctuated wildly, the child's iridescent scales shifting between dull gray and sickly green. Vilara hadn't moved from the bedside, all 6 hands constantly in motion, checking monitors, adjusting blankets, or simply hovering protectively over their child. The protein markers are showing unusual patterns, Dr. Patel muttered, studying the latest readings. It's like the treatment is triggering some kind of secondary reaction we didn't anticipate. Sarah leaned closer to the displays, fighting exhaustion. They'd modified a human gene therapy treatment, combining it with elements from Vilara's people's medical technology. In theory, it should have halted the genetic cascade. In practice, something's wrong, Vilara suddenly announced, their translator barely keeping up with their rapid speech. The color. This isn't right. Sarah rushed to the bedside. Kieran's scales were taking on a metallic sheen she hadn't seen before, and the child's temperature was rising rapidly. Get me a spectral analysis of their cellular structure, she ordered. And where's that xenobiology report? As if summoned by her words, Dr. Winston burst into the room, tablet in hand. You need to see this, he said, face grave. We found something in their genetic archives that Vilara's people missed. The data he showed them made Sarah's blood run cold. The treatment wasn't just failing, it was accelerating the cascade in an entirely new direction. They had less than 6 hours before total systemic collapse. There has to be something we can do, Sarah insisted, mind racing through possibilities. Vilara, in your species' history, has anything like this ever been seen before? The alien parent was silent for a long moment, all 4 eyes fixed on their child. There are stories, they finally said. Ancient tales of our people, before we achieved spaceflight, of children born with the silver death, whose scales would turn to metal before. They couldn't finish the sentence. And did any survive? Sarah pressed gently. 1. Velura whispered. In the stories, one child was saved by drinking from a spring rich in. They consulted their translator, searching for the right words, what you would call rare earth elements. Dr. Winston's eyes widened. The metallic sheen. What if it's not just a symptom? What if their body is trying to incorporate metallic elements to stabilize the genetic structure? But we'd need to know exactly which elements, Dr. Patel objected. In what proportions? One wrong combination cooled. I might be able to help with that. A new voice joined the conversation. Sarah turned to see Kutl, the crystalline alien from the IMC, standing in the doorway. Our species evolved in mineral-rich environments. We understand how biological systems can incorporate metallic elements. For a moment, everyone stared at the crystalline being. This was unprecedented. Direct cooperation between three different species' medical knowledge. But Sarah could see the possibilities unfolding. We have 30 minutes to synthesize a treatment, she announced. After that, Kieran's organs will begin to fail. Whatever we're going to do, we do it now. What followed was a blur of activity. Tull's crystalline form hummed at frequencies that helped analyze Kieran's changing cellular structure. Dr. Winston's xenobiology expertise helped identify which elements their body might accept. Velura provided crucial information about their species' natural healing processes. And through it all, Sarah and her team worked to combine these disparate pieces of knowledge into something that might save a child's life. 28 minutes later, Sarah held a shimmering vial of liquid that seemed to catch and reflect light like living mercury. This is either going to save them, she said quietly, or do it, Velura said firmly. Either way, we tried. We did not simply accept what others said was impossible. As Sarah administered the treatment, she felt the weight of history pressing down on them. This moment could change everything, or end in tragedy. But that was the price of pushing boundaries, of refusing to accept limitations. The effect was almost immediate. Kieran's scales began to pulse with light, the metallic sheen spreading in waves across their small form. The child's body arched, and for one terrible moment, Sarah thought they had failed. Then the monitors began to stabilize. The metallic sheen didn't fade. Instead, it seemed to settle into the scales, creating patterns of iridescent silver that rippled with each breath. Kieran's eyes fluttered open, all four of them focusing briefly on their parent before closing again in natural sleep. The cascade is stopping, Dr. Patil announced, wonder in his voice. The new elements are actually integrating with their cellular structure, creating a stable matrix. Velura made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret, something between a sob and a song. All 6 hands reached out to touch their child's now shimmering scales. They're warm again, they whispered. Truly warm. Kittle moved closer, their crystalline form catching and refracting the light from Kieran's scales. This will need to be documented, they said. Studied. The implications for medical science across all our species. Later, Sarah interrupted firmly. Right now, this child needs rest, and their parent needs a moment of peace. As her team filed out of the room, Sarah paused at the door, looking back at Velura cradling their sleeping child. The sight made her think of all the boundaries this case had broken. Between species, between different forms of medicine, between what was thought possible and impossible. The price of hope, she realized, wasn't just in the risks taken or rules broken. It was in the willingness to reach across divides, to combine knowledge in new ways, to see beyond the limitations of any one perspective. And sometimes, that price paid dividends beyond imagining. A new understanding. News of Kieran's recovery spread through the interstellar medical community like a shockwave. Within days of the successful treatment, Chicago Memorial found itself at the center of an unprecedented diplomatic and scientific storm. Sarah watched from her office window as another alien ship descended into the newly established medical landing zone, the third today. The Interstellar Medical Council has officially requested that you present your findings at their next assembly, Amanda Hayes announced, setting a tablet on Sarah's desk. The State Department official looked both exhausted and exhilarated. They're calling it the Chicago Protocol, the first truly collaborative breakthrough in cross-species medicine. Sarah turned from the window, noting the dark circles under Hayes's eyes that probably matched her own. And the legal implications. Being rewritten as we speak. Hayes smiled slightly. It's amazing how quickly bureaucracy can move when faced with undeniable results. The treaties are being amended to allow for supervised medical cooperation between species. A gentle chime announced another visitor. kYeah entered, their scales now matching the metallic sheen of their child's. It was a side effect they'd chosen to keep, a visible reminder of how close they'd come to losing Kieran. The first group of children has arrived, kYeah announced. Their translator now carried subtle inflections of emotion, a gift from the hospital's engineering team. 7 cases of genetic cascade failure from 3 different species. Their families. They paused, all 4 eyes blinking rapidly. Their families have traveled so far for hope. Sarah felt the weight of those words. Since Kieran's recovery, they'd received hundreds of requests from across the galaxy, parents desperate for the same miracle. The hospital had transformed an entire wing into an interstellar treatment center, with kYeah and a team of crystalline medical experts working alongside human doctors. How's Kieran handling all the attention? Sarah asked, genuinely curious. The child had become something of a celebrity in both human and alien media. kYeah's scales rippled with what Sarah had learned to recognize as pride. They asked to speak to the new families today, to show them that different doesn't mean broken. They hesitated. They also asked about becoming a doctor. Said they want to learn both human and crystalline medicine. The first of many. I expect, Hayes mused. We're already getting requests from medical schools across Earth about establishing xenobiology programs, and at least 3 alien species have proposed exchange programs for human medical students. Sarah's computer chimed with an incoming priority message. Dr. Patel's excited face filled the screen. Dr. Chen, you need to see this. We've been analyzing the combined data from Kieran's case and kYeah's mineral integration techniques. There are applications for human genetic disorders we never even considered. Send it to my tablet, Sarah replied, already reaching for her lab coat. kYeah, would you like to assist? Your insight into how the treatment affected Kieran's cellular structure could be valuable. The alien scales flickered with pleasure. They had proved to have a natural talent for genetic analysis, their multiple limbs and eyes allowing them to process complex data patterns in unique ways. Of course, though perhaps we should also invite the Zoraxian medical team. Their understanding of quantum biology might offer new perspectives. I'll arrange the necessary clearances, Hayes offered, already tapping at her device. The Council is particularly interested in any developments that demonstrate successful multi-species collaboration. As they made their way to the lab, Sarah observed the changed atmosphere in her hospital. Human doctors consulted with crystalline experts in the hallways. Alien children played in the pediatric ward, their various appendages and features no longer drawing startled looks from human patients. Medical devices combining technologies from multiple species monitored patients with unprecedented accuracy. In the research wing, they found Dr. Patel practically bouncing with excitement as he displayed complex genetic models in the air. kYeah stood nearby, their crystalline form refracting the holographic light into rainbow patterns across the walls. Look at this, Dr. Patel gestured to a particular sequence. By combining the mineral integration process with human gene therapy and adding elements of Zoraxian quantum stabilization, we could target genetic disorders at the subatomic level. kYeah finished, their form humming at a frequency that indicated intense interest. The implications for treating previously incurable conditions are revolutionary, kYeah added, all 6 hands moving through the holographic display, rearranging data patterns with practiced ease. But we'll need to account for the varying quantum states of different species' cellular structures. Sarah watched them work, these brilliant minds from across the galaxy coming together to solve problems that had once seemed insurmountable. This, she realized, was the true miracle, not just the saving of one child, but the barriers broken and bridges built in the process. A small figure appeared in the doorway, scales shimmering silver in the lab's lights. Kieran stood watching the adults work, their 4 eyes wide with curiosity. "Mother," they called softly, "Dr. Chen. The new families are asking questions about the treatment. May I show them my scales? Tell them how it felt." Vilera looked to Sarah, who nodded. "Sometimes," she said, "the best medicine is hope. Show them that healing is possible, even if it leaves you changed." As Kieran led their parent away, Hayes stepped closer to Sarah. "You know," she said quietly, "when I was sent here to shut this down, I never imagined I'd end up helping to rewrite interstellar medical law. The protocols we're establishing here will save countless lives across multiple species." "That's the thing about breaking barriers," Sarah replied, watching Kittle and Dr. Patil excitedly discuss new treatment possibilities. "Once they're down, you realize they were artificial to begin with. We're all just trying to heal, to help, to hope. The only real difference is in how many hands we have to work with." Legacy of change. 5 years after a desperate alien mother first appeared in Chicago Memorial's emergency room, Sarah Chen stood at the podium of the newly inaugurated Interstellar Medical Academy. The massive auditorium was filled with beings from across the galaxy, humans alongside crystalline forms, scaled bodies next to ethereal light beings, all united by the common purpose of healing. "When we first treated Kieran," Sarah began, her words automatically translated into dozens of languages, "we weren't trying to change the universe. We were simply trying to save one child. But sometimes the smallest actions create the largest ripples." In the front row, Vilera sat with pride radiating from their shimmering scales. Beside them, Kieran, now a teenager by their species standards, wore the distinctive silver-trimmed uniform of the Academy's first class of multi-species medical students. Their scales still bore the metallic sheen of their treatment, now considered a badge of honor among their people. "The Chicago Protocol began as an emergency measure," Sarah continued, gesturing to the holographic displays showing the evolution of their treatment methods. "Today, it's the foundation of a new era in medical science. We've cured diseases that once devastated entire species. We've discovered that the differences between us aren't barriers, they're opportunities for innovation." Kittle, now the head of the Academy's Xenobiology Department, cast rainbow refractions across the hall as they moved to join Sarah at the podium. In the past 5 years, their crystalline voice chimed, "The collaboration between our species has led to over 300 major medical breakthroughs. The mineral integration techniques that saved Kieran's life have been adapted to treat 47 different genetic conditions across 12 species." Dr. Patel, sporting a few more gray hairs but the same enthusiastic energy, activated another holographic display. "But perhaps most importantly, we've created something that will outlast any single discovery, a new way of thinking about medicine itself." The display showed images from the Academy's various facilities, human doctors learning crystalline healing techniques, alien healers studying human surgical methods, students from dozens of species working together in state-of-the-art laboratories that combine technologies from across the galaxy. "Mother," Kieran's voice carried clearly as they stood to address the assembly. "Dr. Chen, when you fought to save my life, you did more than heal my body. You showed us all that the boundaries between species are only as real as we make them." Vilera rose to stand beside their child, all 6 hands moving in graceful gestures that needed no translation. "Pride, gratitude, hope. 5 years ago, I came to Earth ready to sacrifice everything for my child. Instead, I found a way to help countless children across the galaxy." Sarah watched as Vilera and Kieran demonstrated the latest version of the treatment that had saved their life, now refined, improved, and adapted through the combined efforts of multiple species. The shimmering liquid no longer looked like mercury. It sparkled with crystalline fragments and pulsed with quantum-stabilized energy. "The real breakthrough," Sarah addressed the assembly again, wasn't just in the medicine. It was in learning to see beyond our differences, to combine our knowledge in ways none of us could have achieved alone. Every species brings unique perspectives, unique abilities, unique ways of understanding the universe. She gestured to the diverse crowd before her. Look around you. In this room are beings who once would have been forbidden from sharing medical knowledge. Now, we learn from each other daily. We heal together. We grow together. Amanda Hayes, now the Earth's ambassador to the Interstellar Medical Council, stepped forward with a data crystal. The Council has officially approved the expansion of the Academy program to 12 more locations across the galaxy. The age of isolated medical development is over. The announcement was met with a wave of approval expressed in dozens of different ways. Human applause, crystalline harmonic resonance, the rippling of scales, the pulsing of bioluminescent appendages. Sarah felt the emotion in the room transcend species barriers. Later, as the formal ceremonies concluded, Sarah found herself in her old office at Chicago Memorial. The view had changed. The medical landing zone now hosted ships from across the galaxy, and the hospital itself had grown to accommodate its role as a pioneer in interstellar medicine. Dr. Chen, Kiran stood in the doorway, their scales catching the evening light. I wanted to show you something before the reception. They held out a data pad displaying their latest research project, a novel combination of human genetic therapy, crystalline mineral integration, and their own species' biological principles. Sarah studied the project, feeling a familiar surge of excitement at the possibilities it presented. This could revolutionize regenerative medicine, she said. Have you shown it to kYeah yet? Tomorrow, Kiran replied. I wanted you to see it first, because none of this would have been possible if you hadn't been willing to try the impossible 5 years ago. Valera appeared behind their child, accompanied by kYeah and Dr. Patel. We're about to announce the next phase of the Academy's expansion, Valera said. The first fully integrated medical research facility on their homeworld. Sarah looked at the beings before her, no longer divided by species or origin, but united in their commitment to healing. She remembered that desperate night in the emergency room, the choice to break protocols and push boundaries. You know, she said, humans have an old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. But perhaps it's more accurate to say that hope is the mother of change. Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to accept limitations, one moment of reaching across barriers, to transform the possible. Through her window, she could see new ships arriving, bringing more students, more healers, more possibilities. The sun was setting on Earth, but across the galaxy, a new era in medicine was just beginning.